West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The former president, Donald Trump, had a lot to say tonight. Many of the things he said, of course, were abjectly false, a torrent of falsehoods even from the get-go. CNN's Sarah Murray joins us now. Her job tonight is fact-checking. Sarah, I'm not going to ask you to fact-check everything he said that was false because we only have a couple more hours. But what strikes you?
Well, look, I think one of the things off of the top was that we heard former President Trump again say the election was rigged and talk about ballot stuffing. And look, the reality is the election was not rigged. Biden won by more than 7 million votes. And that ballot stuffing claim, that was also bogus. Here is Trump's false claim on this tonight.
A lot of the people in this audience, and maybe a couple that don't, but most people understand what happened. It was a rigged election, and it's a shame that we had to go through it.
Can you publicly acknowledge that you did lose the 2020 election?
Let me just go on. If you look at True the Vote, they found millions of votes on camera, on government cameras, where they were stuffing ballot boxes. So with all of that, I think it's a shame that what happened. I think it's a very sad thing for our country.
Now, there is just no basis for this claim. It is a lie. We have heard Trump claim before that there was ballot stuffing by election workers in Georgia. It has been debunked, including by Republican election officials in Georgia. There is no sign any illegality like this occurred on a large scale, and multiple former Trump officials, including Trump's own former Attorney General Bill Barr, have said there was not sufficient fraud to change the outcome of the 2020 election, Jake.
Yeah, and that True the Vote group is a group of unserious right-wing activists. It is not some sort of objective election board. It's amazing to hear them cited as some sort of source. Trump also claimed he offered to send troops to the Capitol on January 6th, but House Speaker Nancy Pelosi turned him down. I don't think that's true. Sarah?
No, not the case. I mean, Trump has tried to blame former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi for the violence on January 6th. He's falsely claimed he ordered the National Guard to the Capitol. So here's Trump's attempt to rewrite history tonight.
Chris Miller wrote a book, and he's a fantastic guy, and he was ready to go. They turned him down. If you look, the mayor of Washington, D.C., lovely lady, she said, we don't want it. We don't like the look. Nancy Pelosi said, we don't like the look. If they would have had I offered them 10,000 soldiers. I said, it could be 10, it could be more, but I offered them specifically 10,000 soldiers. If they would have taken 500 soldiers, you wouldn't have had the problem. They turned it down.
Here is the reality. The House Speaker is not in charge of Capitol security. That's the Capitol Police Board, which oversees the Capitol Police, and at the time of the riot would have approved requests for National Guard assistance. And here is former acting Defense Secretary Chris Miller telling the January 6th committee that he was never given an order by Trump to have 10,000 troops ready to go to the Capitol on January 6th.
To be crystal clear, there was no direct order from President Trump to put 10,000 troops to be on the ready for January 6th. Correct.
No. That's correct. There was no order from the president.
So, Jake, as you can see, these claims by Trump about January 6th, also false.
Sarah Murray, thanks so much for that. I'm sure you're going to have more fact checks for us because there were more lies than I could count said by the former president this evening. Let's talk about one of the politically more impactful decisions of his presidency to put 3 conservatives on the Supreme Court that would ultimately overturn Roe v. Wade, and what he had to say about that tonight. Caitlin Collins was trying to get him to say whether he would sign a national abortion ban if he were reelected. He wouldn't really take a position, but here is what he said about overturning Roe v. Wade.
I consider the other side to be radical. Because the other side, under Roe v. Wade and other things, the other side, they're radical because they will, remember the debate with Hillary Clinton? They said, rip the baby out of the womb at the end of the 9th month. They will kill the baby in the 9th month. If you look at that crazy governor of Virginia from the former governor, where he said, no, the baby will be born, and then we'll decide essentially whether or not to execute the baby.
But, Mr. President, can we talk about what you would do if
these are the radical people.
Obviously, he would rather talk about positions that Hillary Clinton never took than his own position, which is not supported by polls. Just to be clear, the things he was saying about Democrats there were not true. Hillary Clinton did not say anything about ripping the baby out of the womb. Let's just talk about the politics of this. Overturning Roe v. Wade is unpopular with the American people. It's unpopular with the voters. He needs to win the presidency should he get the nomination. He doesn't want to talk about this. I don't know that he's found a way to talk about it.
No, that was pretty clear tonight. And understandably, there is so much to unpack in this town hall. But if he does get the nomination, which is still a big if, we're very, very early in the process here, he will have to face a Democratic president who has a White House and a campaign who looks at the 2022 midterms and believes that this is exhibit A, B, and C of why, yes, the economy is troubled, yes, that there are questions about Joe Biden, but they still believe that the abortion issue will drive voters out to the polls to vote for Joe Biden and to vote against Donald Trump. If you take all the other issues, maybe even all the other noise, and you put them aside, that is still front and center in voters' minds. And that answer, as you said, clearly, if you are the Trump campaign, needs some refining. I don't know that he can refine it before the end of the primary season. Perhaps he will do it if he gets to the general. Not even refining. I mean, he said, I did that. I did that, and that is not what Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania swing voters want.
It seemed to me that the goal tonight for Trump was to reinforce to conservative voters that he supports the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Now, he did that to a point that might have actually produced quite a number of general election ads if he makes it to the general election. But I think that's what they were trying to do, because part of the context here is that in the weeks leading up to this, some of the reporting had been that Trump's aides were Trump was saying to his aides privately that people like Ron DeSantis had perhaps gone too far with the 6-week abortion ban. And when you saw Caitlin pushing him on the dates, would he sign a federal abortion ban? What weeks would he support for an abortion ban? He refused to answer those questions about the specifics. They wanted to double down on I support overturning Roe versus Wade without getting him tied down on anything concrete. That is, by the way, happening right now in the states. These are not hypothetical situations, and Trump would not give the public a clear answer about where he stands. And in that respect, from the Trump campaign, I'm sure that they viewed that as a victory in terms of what he went in wanting to do and how he executed it.
Well, the phrase that he kept using was it gave the Dobbs decision. He called it a great victory. He claimed, of course, that he had taken credit for it, although, again, it's the Supreme Court that actually ruled, not the President of the United States.
Yeah, but he litmus tested the three picks.
He certainly did.
Yeah.
But the issue he was saying was it gave pro-lifers something to negotiate with. Now, why that is so disingenuous is, one, there were already trigger laws that were on the books. That were created to be reinstated or implement new abortion-related bans should Roe v. Wade ever be overturned. Number two, of course, the negotiation he presumes does not happen because you have mifepristone now on the virtual chopping block. You've got abortion bans under partisan majorities in state legislatures where there has been complaints that there's no room to negotiate on these very principles. And so this perception that the Dobbs decision by returning to the states somehow affords a greater opportunity to negotiate is one, not what the Supreme Court really was thinking. Well, they may have thought about it, but they didn't actually anticipate well, but also not what's really happening on the ground. I think we can't lose sight of that.
One other thing I want to talk about is his defense of the people that were storming the Capitol. 4 Trump supporters died that day, including one that was shot by a police officer who was protecting House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. He did his job. They were bursting in. Here is what he had to say about that woman who was led to the Capitol by Donald Trump's lies.
Over 140 officers were injured that day.
And a person named Ashley Babbitt was killed.
Yes.
You know what? She was killed, and she shouldn't have been killed. And that thug that killed her, there was no reason to shoot her. At blank range, cold blank range, they shot her. And she was a good person. She was a patriot. There was no reason. And he went on television to brag about the fact that he killed her.
Okay, I mean, again, fact check. He did not go on television to brag about the fact that he killed her. He's not a thug. He's a police officer. He was completely cleared in the incident. He was protecting the House Speaker. Donald Trump, his lies and the lies of his minions, incited this crowd. They violently burst into the Capitol. And yet, here he is taking the side of the mob.
Because he believes with his voters that he has convinced his voters to believe this, and now he's going to stick with it. Again, if any of you out there watching thought maybe he will pivot, maybe he will change, he will not change. He is who he is. He wants to minimize this day. And you heard Congressman Donald saying, why do you keep asking about the 2020 election? Why do you keep asking about January 6th? We have to keep actually. If he is going to be the Republican nominee, or at least now the formidable frontrunner for the Republican nomination, they tried to steal the country. They tried to steal the country. They tried to undermine the foundation of everything. We can talk about abortion. We can talk about taxes. We can talk about infrastructure. We can talk about swimming pools in America if you want to regulate those. You can't have an America without a democracy. Nothing else matters if you take away the foundation. That day was about trying to steal the foundation.
It is Thursday, the 11th of May of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life, and it gets spicy. It does. Hey, I missed the town hall, darn. But we were celebrating our mom's 86th birthday at Carson's Bistro in Grants Pass. A quite lovely place. If you're ever in town, you'll need to make reservations. That's how they like it. And they don't have a fixed menu. It changes by what is seasonal and available. And that's the way everything should be, even at home. Okay? But yeah, check it out. Carson's Bistro. It's a great place. But we had quite a lovely time there. And I didn't look at my phone once. Wow. Mostly because the Warriors and Lakers weren't really playing at that point. And then I probably would have been looking at my phone. But, up to that point, I didn't care. Because I don't care to see. I think what Chris liked, is that how he pronounces his name? Chris liked. Liched. I wish it was liched. Anyway, Chris liked the head of CNN now. He likes his town halls to be mini Nuremberg rallies, apparently. Yeah, he's maintaining that the reason he seated the whole town hall with Trump supporters is because apparently everybody else's voice is more outsized than theirs, and he's not going to ignore them. I can't ignore them. I mean, we ignored them before. No, you didn't. Once again, you gave them outsized reportage, just like they always have had for decades and decades and decades, for the silent majority they claim themselves to be, they are neither a majority nor have they ever been silent. They've been nothing but whiny-ass, white privileged deplorables, poorly educated, too. It's a virtue to be poorly educated. The more you know, the more you've been brainwashed. Really? Is that how it works in your spectrum? Yeah, my God. Anyway, missed that. I get to hear about it now. Yeah, all the analysis and reportage on it. I can see what went on. Chris Like believes that he did America a great service. I guess he did America a great service by having all those rape jokes out there on prime time. And then a town hall full of deplorables clapping and laughing like they're at some porn show at the Elks Club. Jesus Christ. We got the Super 8 running, and we're going to show some Betty Page dominatrix, partially clad, you know what we mean, wink, 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 at the Elks Club. All those interested, come on down, we'll have refreshments. Yeah. Okay. I guess that's what it was. Hooping and hollering. Oh, yeah. And apparently America needs more of that. Do we? I thought there was a responsibility that news organizations hold, but apparently that's not news anymore. At best, I guess you could call it entertainment. Okay. Looks to me like unbridled propaganda. Sure looked like that from what I've seen so far. God, am I glad I didn't see it in real time. Yeah, that was a good excuse to go celebrate Mom's 86th birthday. I mean, when is she going to do that again? Not 86. 87, I don't know. 88, 89, she's doing so much better. Truly is. Also, we do have a new addition to the mothership here at Netroots Radio in our little burg of Rogue River in Southern Oregon. I have probably mentioned this before, but yes, we have a little true Yorkshire Terrier by the name of Precious. She's quite a great addition, I have to say. And there's some sort of machinery just driving by. I hope that's not drowning out the noise in your whatever is happening in your realm over there, but it sure was disrupting here. Now it's gone away. The Doppler effect. I like it. Anyway, we'll figure out a position here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy for Precious. I think the obvious one would for her to be the hostess who will seat you directly, but we'll have to figure out how to fit that in the patter. Yeah. Because we don't do just the news here. We do entertainment too. Because I guess, we're just like CNN. I hope not. Hooping and hollering over rape jokes. We don't do that here. Not even prison rape jokes. I hate prison rape jokes. And you know why? Because I don't like the idea of rape. And that doesn't seem to me to be a joking matter. Oh, it's just locker room talk. Not when I was in the locker room. I told those effers to shut the F up. You think I'm forceful now? Imagine how it was when I was just getting the first inklings and droplets of testosterone in my system. I'll tell you what's up. Yeah, my sisters had been sexually abused by the guys. Wherever we were, there's always some guy, young and old, who were at best oglers, obvious oglers, and others who couldn't keep their mouths shut. And if they ever tried to, touch, my sisters knew how to take care of themselves, even though I won't get into it, but they were both raped. So I never had any patience for a bunch of guys hooping and hollering about whether they got to first base, second base, third base, or home run, whatever that might be, in their, I don't know, misogynistic juvenile minds. And that was a spectacle that we were confronted with, apparently. I'm glad I missed it in real time, aren't you? Yeah. Oh, the machinery that's been driving by is the street sweeper, which is good, because we like the streets around here to be swept and clean. Okay, during the rains, all that stuff goes into the storm drains, and that's not good. Clogs them up, and we don't like that. Who would? So we have this town hall. This wasn't a town hall. And whatever Ted Turner and others tried to do for decades and decades of trying to make CNN the premier news channel around the world, well, it's lying propaganda now. Indeed it is. All right. What do we have in store for you here as we begin this fabulous Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays? Oh, just as a reminder, my recipe of Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays is in the show notes and links, and I'll give you some information about that, as if you've never heard before. Anyway, what's on the rest of the menu here as we begin in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? The Justice Department has reached a settlement with a New Jersey county over language barriers for Spanish-speaking voters. Yeah, the barriers are more of a feature rather than a bug there, and they got caught. A New Hampshire utility has proposed a transmission line from Canada to carry renewable power to New England. They better get on with those windmills off the coast. There's a lot of people out there. When I say a lot of people, I mean like deplorable type people who think that wind energy is some sort of plot, a conspiracy, and they call it big wind. And their defense, their argument about why they don't want to have like windmills offshore is like, well, how would you like it if you had some windmills put on your coast over there in pristine Big Sur and Malibu? And I send them pictures of all the oil derricks and the islands that they build to try to hide the fact that there's oil derricks, and then showing them pictures of dead seagulls and other what used to be life. Coated with heavy oil. Okay, yeah. Tell us about whether we would want wind power or, that fossil fuel stuff that's out there already. Okay, there you go. And officials in a remote northeastern Oregon county have voted to give tax breaks worth an estimated $1 billion to Amazon and Bezos for 5 more data centers there. Okay, let's use up all the water that we don't have anymore. Even though we got a lot, they want to use it all up again. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Spain plans to ban outdoor work during periods of extreme heat, and Tunisian authorities cannot figure out what a National Guardsman's motive was to kill 2 Jewish pilgrims and then 3 security officers who were protecting one of the world's oldest synagogues. Just can't figure out what the motive was. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Radio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so. Across the page to the left from that chat room link is our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help us pay our bills. So please help us. If you could afford to spend if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, that really does help us pay our bills and continue this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting for over 12 years now, a dozen years. And we have you to thank for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended all those many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter while we're still there, I got to tell you, Tom and I have spoken, and we're going to be giving a countdown about our exodus from this platform. But you can still find us on Twitter, but also on Mastodon and Spoutable by going to @NetrootsRadio. How simple is that? You can follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Coast 10 minutes before showtime, but you can always find the show notes and links diaries by going to my social media feeds, and the links are all there. They are. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Ayanna Alexander from the Associated Press. The Justice Department has reached a settlement with a New Jersey county over language barriers for Spanish-speaking voters, emphasizing a growing challenge for certain minority communities nationwide. Yeah, if you let people vote in their original language, they're woke, and so are you. Can't have that. The agreement with Union County comes after federal prosecutors filed a lawsuit alleging it failed to make registration and voting notices, forms, instructions, and ballots available in Spanish, violating sections of the Federal Voting Rights Act. And, of course, you know the county will argue, but we thought that the Supreme Court got rid of that so we can be going back to our racist ways. Do they speak like that in New Jersey? Maybe not. We know firsthand how language barriers hurt our community, said Hector Sanchez Barba, chief executive of Mi Familia Vota, a national group seeking to boost Latino political influence. Eliminating language barriers is not only legally sound, but also the right thing to do to strengthen our democracy. And I got to tell you, he's right. The county, which has nearly 28,000 Spanish-speaking citizens of voting age, will be required to print all election materials in English and Spanish and ensure that someone is available to assist Spanish-speaking voters in person. It also will have to assist voters with disabilities, who have long been overlooked in the fight for access to the polls. What was the ADA about? Yes, not just getting people in so they can get a haircut, but so that they can vote. The consent decree announced yesterday or on Tuesday will need approval from a federal judge. New Jersey is one of the several places across the U.S. where language barriers hamper access to the ballot for minority communities, according to voter advocacy groups. Some Asian American and Asian immigrant communities are particularly affected. Despite a long history in the U.S., said Susana Lorenzo Guiguera, the Associate Director of the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund's Democracy Program, Asian Americans still face bias that views them as perpetual foreigners who aren't real Americans and don't deserve to be a part of the fabric of our democracy, she said. And that's exactly how they feel, because they're deplorable and they're ignorant. Back to the article. Under the Federal Voting Rights Act, communities must provide language assistance for voting if more than 5% of the voting age citizens, or over 10,000, have limited English proficiency. Wilson Ring of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. The newest proposal for a major electrical transmission line from Canada that would be able to carry power to New England from Canada would also be able to send to Quebec renewable energy produced by future power generators off the New England coast or other sources. The proposed 211-mile, $2 billion twin-state clean energy link would enter the United States in Cannon, Vermont. It would be buried along state highways in Vermont and New Hampshire until it linked to an existing transmission corridor in Monroe that would then carry the power to a new substation in Londonderry. From there, the power could be distributed throughout New England. You can think about the Twin States line almost like battery storage. The line would not need to be always on and delivering energy from Quebec to New England, said a statement from the electrical utility National Grid, one of the developers of the proposed New Hampshire project. Instead, it would be used when there is a need to bring additional clean energy to the region to balance variable resources, such as offshore wind. Unlike much of the power currently brought to the United States from Canada that is generated by hydro generation facilities in Quebec, it would also have the ability to deliver power generated by wind and solar facilities in Canada. In a statement, Hydro-Quebec said cross-border infrastructure optimizes the use of renewable energy, hydro, wind, and solar in Quebec and the northeastern United States. Even though HQ is not involved with the Twin States project, this project's business model is a demonstration of how the energy transition is taking shape in our broader region, the statement said, without the A. For years, the northeastern United States has tried to find ways to take advantage of hydropower produced in Canada, and Canadian officials have been eager to sell power in the U.S. Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Officials in a remote northeastern Oregon county have voted to give tax breaks worth an estimated $1 billion to Amazon for 5 more data centers there. Yesterday, Wednesday's unanimous vote by Port of Morrow's 5 commissioners was the last step in securing the enterprise zone incentives. Companies in the state can receive property tax exemptions through local enterprise zones. Local officials hope the incentives will bring $12 billion in new Amazon spending in their county. That's along the Columbia River, about 160 miles from Portland to the east. Amazon already has 4 giant data centers in Morrow County and several hundred local jobs tied to its operations, but its growth has produced contentious debate over how the Seattle company secured its incentives and an ongoing probe over possible self-dealing by some people awarding its tax breaks. The state is investigating potential conflicts of interest among the port officials and a former county commissioner who owned Windwave Communications, a company that provides fiber optic service to Amazon's local data centers. Amazon and Windwave have not responded to requests from the media for information about the value of the two companies' contracts. Those two port commissioners, Jerry Healy and Marv Padberg, in an April letter to the State Ethics Commission, said their company does have a deal to provide most of the fiber optic service to one new Amazon data center, but they said they only have a potential conflict of interest in voting on incentives for the other four facilities, just a potential. 3 other public bodies in Monroe County previously gave their approval to the latest agreement, each in votes with little public discussion. The incentives exempt Amazon from paying nearly 3/4 of the property taxes other businesses have to pay. But Amazon is Monroe County's largest taxpayer. Its data centers account for 1/3 of property tax revenue, with payments of $26 million in 2021. According to the company, Amazon declined to make any of its local managers available to the Oregonian for comment on its data center operations. David Sykes, chairman of the Monroe County Commission, told the Oregonian he sees Amazon fitting into a nicely diversified economy. It's a good blend of industries, Sykes said, that rescued the county from its dependency on natural resources after a sawmill and coal plant shut down. And data centers are among the state's fastest growing industries, fueled partly by tax breaks worth $180 million last year alone. But lest I remind you, they also use a lot of water, ground or from a river like the Columbia, to keep those data centers cool, don't they? All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, and welcome to Your Health Quickly, a Scientific American podcast series.
On this show, we highlight the latest vital health news, discoveries that affect your body and your mind. Every episode, we dive into one topic. We discuss diseases, treatments, and some controversies.
And we demystify the medical research in ways you can use to stay healthy. I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
We're Scientific American's senior health editors.
On the show today, we're talking about an obscure 19th century obscenity law. It's given rise to the recent court rulings that attempt to restrict access to the abortion pill mifepristone.
April was a busy month for the fight to roll back reproductive rights. First, a judge in Texas issued a ruling that would have removed the abortion pill mifepristone from the market. It's used in more than half of abortions in the U.S., and it's also used for miscarriage treatment. The Supreme Court has blocked the ruling for now.
Mifepristone, known as the abortion pill, gets a temporary lifeline from the U.S. Supreme Court. Justices need more time to weigh in on whether the drug should remain widely available or roll back restrictions placed on mifepristone when it was approved more than 20 years ago.
In the district court case, Trump-appointed Judge Matthew Kacsmaryk ruled in favor of anti-abortion activists and doctors, who argued that the Food and Drug Administration did not adequately address the safety risks when it approved the drug more than 20 years ago.
But that's not true, is it? I've seen dozens of studies about the pill's safety.
Right. A wealth of research shows it is extremely safe and effective. Studies show that more than 99% of patients who take abortion pills have no serious complications.
Just a few hours after that Texas ruling, Thomas Rice, a district judge in Washington state appointed by Barack Obama, issued a competing ruling. That one ordered the FDA to do nothing to restrict mifepristone access where abortion is currently legal. And that includes 17 states and Washington, D.C.
The Department of Justice and Danco Laboratories, the company that manufactures mifepristone, appealed the Texas decision to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. That court issued a stay on the ruling until the case could be fully heard, but imposed certain restrictions on the drug that had been in place before 2016.
Restrictions like what?
Like banning people from sending mifepristone by mail. But more on that in a sec. So after all this back and forth, the Supreme Court weighed in on April 21st. It issued a hold on both the Texas and Fifth Circuit rulings, restoring full access to mifepristone while the Fifth Circuit appeal proceeds later this month. And that's where things stand now.
I'm having trouble following the legal logic of all this. What was the original Texas ruling based on? We already talked about mifepristone's good safety record, and medication abortion has been legal for decades.
That's a great question. The plaintiffs in the Texas case argued that mifepristone, which is part of a 2-drug regimen along with the drug misoprostol, could cause serious complications in people who took it. But dozens of studies have shown that the drug combo causes fewer side effects than many other FDA-approved medications, including Tylenol and Viagra.
Interesting that the Texas doctors were more concerned about mifepristone than Viagra. But okay, the abortion pill is quite safe. What about the Fifth Circuit ruling that said that mifepristone shouldn't be sent by mail? Where did that come from?
I'm glad you asked. Both the Fifth Circuit ruling and the original Texas decision cited a law from 1873 called the Comstock Act, which forbids the mailing of, quote, obscene, lewd, or lascivious materials.
It's named after a guy named Anthony Comstock, who was a very famous moral crusader based in New York in the mid-19th century. His career started mostly because he was interested in stamping out obscenity.
That's Annalee Newitz, an author and science journalist. They wrote a sci-fi novel called The Future of Another Timeline. It's about a group of feminists who travel back in time to stop Comstock's misogynistic anti-obscenity crusade. For a recent story on Siam.com, I spoke with Newitz about Comstock and how his law is still being used to restrict reproductive rights.
It just forbids the sending of obscene materials through the mail. Any kind of information that was sex education related, not obscene, like just literally things like, here's how to make a baby for people who are getting married, and also information about birth control and abortion.
The law was based on the First Amendment's exception for obscenity, which is not protected as free speech. Of course, keep in mind that the definition of obscenity back then was pretty vague. It included anything related to reproductive health, abortion, or sex education. Congress actually created a new position for Comstock as a special agent of the U.S. Postal Service, where he had the power to arrest people for obscenity violations.
He also had this organization called the New York Society for Suppression of Vice, which just sounds like something out of like a Marvel comic. They would figure out who was, an abortion provider and break in.
And Comstock and his deputies were pretty brutal.
They would know that the person was in the midst of doing an abortion. They would break into her house during the abortion and drag them to the police station, like bleeding, and leave them on the floor to make a point.
They really did that? That's just terrifying and dangerous. A patient could die.
Absolutely. It was pretty barbaric. Comstock also went after art and literature that he considered obscene.
Comstock tried to shut down the Chicago World's Fair because they were putting belly dancers out as one of the many, many acts that you could go see. And he thought belly dancing was obscene.
In 1905, playwright George Bernard Shaw wrote an op-ed in the New York Times making fun of America's, quote, Comstockery, a term he used to refer to its censorious attitude toward art and literature.
Shaw was actually firing back at a public library that put his plays on a restricted reading list. Comstockery, he wrote, is the world's standing joke. If I had the misfortune to be a citizen of the United States, I should probably have my property confiscated by some postal official and be myself imprisoned. Comstockery's a great term. I'm going to start using it.
I know, right? But even though Comstock himself became kind of a joke, the Act and similar laws enacted by states stayed on the books. In the 1960s and 70s, the Supreme Court issued several key rulings that restricted the definition of obscenity. As Justice Potter Stewart famously said in the 1964 case Jacobellis v. Ohio, when asked to define obscenity,
I know it when I see it.
And in 1973, you had Roe v. Wade, which basically said abortion is legal because of a constitutional right to privacy, not because abortion itself was protected.
Pretty much every lawyer I've heard talk about this, who's sort of knowledgeable about reproductive rights, is like, why the hell did we do that? That was such a precarious ruling, so easy to roll back.
And that is exactly what happened when the Dobbs decision came last summer. That one overturned Roe v. Wade, paving the way for many states to ban or severely restrict abortion.
Exactly. And all this time, we never actually repealed the provisions of the Comstock Act having to do with sending abortion medication by mail. So the Texas mifepristone ruling and the Fifth Circuit stay have used the law as justification for attempting to restrict the abortion pill's distribution.
So what happens next?
The Fifth Circuit Appeals Court has scheduled a hearing for May 17th. But the case is almost certainly headed back to the Supreme Court, where justices will likely have to wrestle with the legacy of Comstock yet again.
Well, I guess we'll see if Comstockery holds up in the 21st century. Your Health Quickly is produced and edited by Talika Bose, Jeff Delvisio, Kelsa Harper, and Ella Fetter. Our music is composed by Dominic Smith.
Our show is part of Scientific American's podcast, Science Quickly. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like the show, give us a rating or a review.
And don't forget to go to SciAm.com for updated and in-depth health news.
I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
We'll be back in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Book banning is at an all-time high.
Listen up. This matters. I'm Louis Black, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
The highest since the ALA, that's the American Library Association, began tracking this data 20 years ago. Twice as many bans in 2022 as in 2021, a year that itself had set an all-time high. Years ago, a local parent or community member might demand that a book be taken off the shelf. Now, there are demands for multiple removals, sometimes hundreds of books at a time, demands often made by organized groups, many national, that have a political or a social agenda. A few books have been challenged because they have racist language, but the vast majority of the books being targeted have LGBTQ themes. These groups don't want people to read these books. The director of the Library Association's Office for Intellectual Freedom is quoted in the recent AP story as saying that the last 2 years, quote, have been exhausting, frightening, and outrage-inducing. And the story is getting worse. Bills that do or may facilitate the restriction of books in public libraries and or schools have passed and or are pending in many states, including Iowa, Texas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Florida, among others. Apparently, the 21st century crusade of book banning has only just begun. That's a fearful prospect, which speaks volumes.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union, because freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1967. That was the day United Farm Workers Sons of Zapata joined with the Confederation of Mexican Workers in establishing an international picket line across the Rio Grande Valley. A push to organize farm workers at 6 major growers began the year before, in the spring of 1966. Wages in Starr County ranged from 40 to 85 cents an hour. Farm workers began their strike in June of 1966 for wage increases and union recognition. But growers would rather see their crops rot than recognize the union. They did grant wage increases, but immediately ran to the courts for injunctions. One district judge outlawed all picketing, while police instructed county workers to spray the strikers with insecticide. That August, workers voted to organize with the United Farm Workers and began a pilgrimage march to the state capitol to popularize their cause. 15,000 workers and their supporters reached Austin on Labor Day to demand their right to organize. They returned to Stark County to continue their strike. The growers turned to Mexican commuters holding green cards to break the strike. The United Farm Workers began picketing at Roma and Rio Grande City bridges and were often successful in turning back green card workers. By May 1967, melon harvest had begun. After months of negotiations, picket lines went up on both sides of the international bridges. The picketing was 100% successful for 2 days, but the Mexican government and Starr County Sheriff's Department soon intervened to break up the picket lines. Texas Rangers were brought in to arrest and brutalize strikers. The strike was broken, but organizing continued throughout the region. Picketing across borders was itself an important act of international solidarity. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.